Before Trump even made it back to the White House, European leaders were already bracing for impact. NATO, the cornerstone of European security, was suddenly in jeopardy. Trump had spent his first term questioning its very existence, calling it obsolete and suggesting the U.S. might pull out altogether. For countries like Poland and the Baltics, whose security relied heavily on American support, this wasn't just political noise. It was a real threat. And it didn't stop there. Trump's aggressive tariffs on European steel, luxury goods, and cars had already rattled Brussels. With Trump's return, European leaders knew they might be walking into a storm of unpredictable trade wars, economic pressure, and diplomatic chaos. The worry wasn't only about what might happen, but how quickly everything could change. European leaders were uncertain whether they could still count on the U.S. when the world was tipping into turmoil. Now, with Trump back in office, the question remains: were their fears justified, or was it just another round of political panic? Let's dive in. Long before Donald Trump secured a return to the White House, European leaders were already sounding the alarm. At the center of their concerns was NATO. Trump had spent years publicly questioning the alliance's relevance, calling it obsolete, and accusing member states of freeloading on American defense spending. European leaders feared that if Trump returned, he could actually make good on his threats, either by withdrawing the United States from NATO altogether or by weakening its military commitments to the point of irrelevance. For countries like Poland, Lithuania, and Estonia, already on the edge due to Russian aggression, this wasn't just political noise. It was a potential unraveling of the very foundation of European security. Without the U.S. acting as the backbone of deterrence, many feared Europe would be left exposed in a world that was only becoming more volatile. On the economic front, the nerves were just as raw. Trump's first term had seen aggressive tariffs against China, but Europe didn't escape the heat either. European steel and aluminum faced steep duties, and threats of border tariffs on cars and luxury goods loomed large. As Trump ramped up America First rhetoric in campaign rallies and media appearances, Brussels began bracing for another wave of economic confrontation. European economies, many of which rely heavily on exports to the U.S., were particularly sensitive to the idea of renewed trade wars. Supply chains were still fragile from the pandemic era, and any additional disruption from U.S. protectionism could prove costly. The fear wasn't just about tariffs. It was about an unpredictable economic partner who might rewrite the rules of global trade at any moment. But what truly kept European policymakers up at night was the sense of unpredictability Trump brought to the global stage. His first term had been a whirlwind of sudden exits from global agreements, bombastic foreign policy moves, and close relationships with authoritarian leaders. Whether it was withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal, or courting Vladimir Putin, Trump acted without warning or coordination with allies. To many in Europe, this represented more than just unconventional leadership. It was chaos. If Trump were to return, the fear was that he would continue acting unilaterally, ignoring alliances and international norms, leaving Europe to scramble in response. The concern wasn't just about what he might do, but how fast and how far he might go without consulting anyone. With Trump finally in the White House again, are their fears truly justified? Let's get into it. European leaders weren't just panicking for no reason. Now that Trump is back in office, a few months into his second term, some of those early fears are already starting to look very real. His second round in the White House hasn't been quiet. It's been loud, sharp, full of moves that have left Europe on edge. Let's start with NATO. Trump hasn't wasted time questioning its value again, just like he did in his first term. But this time he's gone further, cutting back U.S. involvement in joint exercises, freezing certain military funds, and saying that countries not paying their fair share should expect less help. That hits hard for places like Poland and the Baltics, who sit right on Russia's doorstep. Trump also pulled back some intelligence support for Ukraine, calling the war a mess we should stay out of. That sent shockwaves through European defense circles. Then came his trade hits. The Trump administration slapped steep new tariffs on European steel, cars, and luxury goods, claiming Europe was taking advantage of the U.S. again. Brussels didn't take it lying down. They hit back with their own tariffs, and now there's a full-blown trade war rolling again. It's messing with supply chains and shaking up industries on both sides. Economic analysts say Europe could lose hundreds of billions if this keeps going. And of course, there's the unpredictability. European leaders had hoped that maybe in a second term Trump would calm down. Instead, he's made snap decisions, backing off support for Ukraine, floating the idea of cutting off ties with the World Health Organization again, and cozying up to leaders in Russia and North Korea. That kind of move the chessboard in one swipe energy has left Europe unsure of how to respond. It's forcing them to rethink how much they can count on the U.S. when big crises hit. So were their fears justified? Honestly, yes. Trump's second term so far has confirmed what many European leaders worried about. He's shown he's not afraid to shake old alliances, push economic pressure, and go it alone on global issues. Whether Europe can turn this into a chance to stand on its own 2 feet, well, that's a different story. So, what are the European leaders saying or doing in response? Well, you're about to find out. European leaders didn't wait around. As Trump's second term unfolded just like they feared, they started taking action. German Chancellor Annalena Baerbock was one of the first to speak out. She said Europe couldn't wait for the U.S. to lead the way anymore. In response, Germany pushed forward with plans for a stronger European defense union, fast-tracking joint training programs and pooling resources across member states. French President Emmanuel Macron also revived his call for strategic autonomy, saying Europe needed to stand its ground without always looking across the Atlantic. The European Union, meanwhile, moved quickly on the economic front. After Trump hit European goods with fresh tariffs, Brussels rolled out countermeasures worth over $20 billion. Luxury goods from the U.S., including motorcycles, denim, and whiskey, now faced extra charges. It wasn't just about payback. It was a signal that Europe wasn't going to fold. Behind the scenes, EU officials have also started redirecting trade ties, looking more to Asia, Latin America, and even Africa to reduce their dependence on the American market. European foreign ministers began holding more high-level talks without the U.S. at the table. They've invited countries like Japan, South Korea, and Canada into wider security discussions, aiming to build a flexible U.S.-independent coalition. Even the UK, usually close to Washington, has taken a more measured approach. Prime Minister Keir Starmer stressed the need for balance, noting that blind loyalty to Washington could come at a cost. And while Europe has stepped up on Ukraine, increasing aid and weapons deliveries, it's clear they're doing it without waiting for U.S. approval. In fact, some EU states are now coordinating intelligence directly, filling in gaps left behind by the American pullback. It's not seamless, but it's a start. Where then do we go from here? The continent is moving from talk to action. The EU is boosting its defense budget, with plans for a joint rapid response force already taking shape, led by Germany, France, and Poland. Trade deals are being fast-tracked with Japan, India, and Brazil to reduce U.S. dependency. Diplomatically, Europe is stepping up, hosting climate talks without Washington, and leading mediation in Sudan and Gaza. But cracks remain. Hungary and Slovakia are dragging their feet on defense, and there's friction over who pays what. Still, Europe isn't waiting. Trump's return ended the illusion of transatlantic certainty. Now, it's adapt or fall behind. Trump's comeback hit Europe like a storm. NATO's shaken, trade is tense, and old alliances are on edge. Leaders are scrambling, plans are shifting, and the pressure's real. Is this Europe rising to the moment, or bracing for something worse? What do you think? Can the continent hold its ground, or is it already slipping? Let me know in the comments. I'm reading them. And hit subscribe to stay updated as this story continues unfolding. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.